Officer Ryan Hale thought the worst was over after the blizzard that nearly claimed his life, but fate wasn't finished with him yet. When a mysterious German shepherd pulled him from the wreckage that night, it felt like divine intervention. What he didn't know was that this dog, marked by an old canine rescue tattoo, carried secrets tied to a powerful man who would do anything to keep them buried. As Ryan and his rescuer, now named Ranger, uncovered the truth behind Wexler Industries, they found themselves hunted, not by nature this time, but by corruption hiding behind a badge. And when love, loyalty, and faith are tested in the face of darkness, one miracle will prove. Sometimes God doesn't send angels, He sends a dog. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments below. The wind over Silver Ridge screamed like something alive, slashing through the endless white. Snow fell in thick, blinding sheets, swallowing the headlights of the lone patrol SUV as it crawled up the narrow mountain road. Inside, Officer Ryan Hale, 36, gripped the steering wheel with pale knuckles. His breath fogged against the cracked windshield, and the rhythmic thud of the wipers sounded like a heartbeat fighting not to stop. Ryan was a man molded by discipline and loss, tall, broad-shouldered, with a square jaw shadowed by a rough stubble that hinted at sleepless nights. His dark hair was matted from sweat beneath his cap, his storm-gray eyes hollow yet alert, the eyes of someone who had learned to look death in the face and not flinch. Once a Marine, he now carried his quiet service as a police officer in the small mountain town of Silver Ridge, trying to forget that there were things even soldiers couldn't protect. The radio crackled with static before a woman's voice broke through. Dispatch, faint and trembling. Unit 3, reports of gunshots near Pine Hollow. Visibility's dropping fast. Ryan pressed the mic. Copy that. I'm on the Ridge Road, about 5 miles out. His voice was calm, the kind of steady tone that comes from years of forcing panic into silence. Outside, the snow intensified, swirling like ghosts of every lost soul the mountain had claimed. He thought of home. Or what used to be home. The faint smell of cinnamon coffee, the soft hum of music from the kitchen. Sarah, his wife, used to hum when she cooked. She was 32, with slender hands and chestnut hair that caught sunlight like fire. Her eyes were the warm amber of whiskey after dusk, and her laughter was the kind that filled a room without trying. She had been a nurse, strong but gentle, the kind of woman who believed every broken thing could be healed if you just stayed long enough. But she hadn't survived the blizzard 5 winters ago. Her car had skidded on black ice, flipped into the ravine. By the time Ryan found her, the engine was cold. Since then, winter had been his punishment, a reminder that God watched and sometimes did nothing. The steering wheel jerked violently. Ryan snapped back to the present as his SUV hit a patch of ice. Tires screamed. The road vanished. A split second of weightlessness, then metal tore against rock. The world flipped end over end before everything stopped in a violent crash. Airbags exploded, glass shattered, then silence, thick, suffocating silence. Pain arrived like a wave. Ryan tried to move, but his left leg was trapped beneath the dashboard. Warm blood ran down his temple. He blinked through the fog, tasting iron in his mouth. His radio dangled from its cord, useless, hissing static. Unit 3 to base, vehicle down, he rasped, but the storm swallowed his voice. Cold crept in fast, slithering through the broken windows, gnawing at his bones. He thought distantly that maybe this was how it should end. No funerals, no goodbyes, just snow and quiet. He saw Sarah again, standing at the edge of his vision, her face soft and forgiving. You can let go now, she seemed to whisper. His eyelids drooped. The cold numbed everything but the ache in his chest. Then, a sound. A low growl, rough and close. Ryan blinked hard. Through the shattered windshield, a shadow moved. 2 glowing amber eyes cut through the storm. Out of the blinding white stepped a German shepherd, fur matted with ice, ribs faintly visible beneath a thick sable coat. The dog looked wild, older, maybe 6 or 7 years, but there was something in its posture, a steadiness that didn't belong to strays. It circled the wreck, barking once, deep and commanding, the kind of bark that said, I'm here, you're not alone. Ryan stared, delirious. Hey, what the hell are you doing out here? His voice cracked, half laugh, half sob. The shepherd pressed its paws against the mangled door, whining. When it didn't budge, it backed away and began digging through the snow, clearing space around the wreck. The determination was almost human. Then it lunged forward, biting the twisted handle, pulling until metal screamed. Ryan pushed from inside with what strength remained. The door gave way, releasing a blast of freezing air. Snow stung his face. He coughed, vision dimming. The dog barked again, urgent, then pushed its head beneath his arm. It nudged him, growled softly, pulled at his jacket sleeve with its teeth. Inch by inch it dragged him out of the wreck, paws slipping, muscles trembling, breath steaming in the icy air. "Good boy," Ryan whispered, voice barely a ghost. The dog didn't stop. It pulled him away from the wreck, across the frozen ground, until they reached a line of pine trees bent under snow. Beneath the branches, the wind eased slightly. The dog lay beside him, pressing its warm body against his chest. Ryan's breathing was shallow, his skin pale and frostbitten, but the heat from the animal's body anchored him to life. He felt its heartbeat against his ribs, steady, relentless. The storm roared around them. The shepherd lifted its head occasionally, ears twitching at distant sounds, but never moved far. Snow piled higher, covering their tracks. Ryan's thoughts drifted in and out. He remembered Sarah's last words before she drove away that morning. "Promise me you'll come home safe." He had promised, but life had a cruel way of breaking promises for you. He wondered if this dog had belonged to someone once. Maybe it had lost its person too. There was a scar along its left flank, straight and deliberate, surgical, maybe military. The thought flickered and faded as exhaustion dragged him toward darkness. Somewhere in that haze, he thought he heard Sarah's voice again, soft, close. "Not yet, Ryan, not tonight." When dawn came, it was quiet. The storm had moved on, leaving behind a world made of silver and silence. The wreck of the SUV was half buried, a grave of steel under the snow. Ryan stirred weakly, his body numb but alive. Beside him, the dog lay curled, half covered in frost, its eyes opening as soon as he moved. It lifted its head, exhaled a slow cloud of steam, and pressed its nose to his face. "Still here?" he murmured, his lips cracked, voice hoarse. The shepherd's tail thumped once against the frozen ground. Ryan managed a faint smile, though pain screamed through his leg. He reached out, brushing his glove against the animal's fur. "Guess we're both too stubborn to die." Far above, a faint sound broke the silence. The distant chop of helicopter blades cutting through the air. Ryan blinked toward the light breaking through the clouds. Hope, thin but real, spread through his chest. He turned back to the dog, voice trembling. "Hang on, buddy, help's coming." The shepherd lifted its head, ears pricked, eyes fixed on the sky. For a moment, the two of them, man and dog, looked like survivors carved out of the same stubborn will. But even as the helicopter's shadow crossed the snow, Ryan's vision began to fade again, the world turning to white. He reached out one last time, fingers brushing the dog's collar. There was something burned into the leather, faded letters, barely legible, K9-217. Then everything went dark. The steady rhythm of the helicopter blades faded into the morning wind as the storm over Silver Ridge finally broke apart. Light spilled through the clouds, soft and white, like forgiveness. Ryan Hale drifted in and out of consciousness, the sound of voices distant and muffled. Men shouting coordinates, the whine of medical instruments, the crackle of radios. He tried to speak, but his lips wouldn't move. Everything ached. He smelled antiseptic and smoke. Somewhere near his arm, something warm pressed close, a faint vibration, Ranger's weak growl, protective even in exhaustion. Then darkness took him again. When he woke, the world smelled of disinfectant and stale coffee. A beeping sound echoed beside his ear. He was in a hospital room, small, plain, painted in muted cream. His leg was wrapped in thick bandages, suspended in traction. Outside the window, the mountains of Silver Ridge stood wrapped in fresh snow, indifferent and eternal. Ryan blinked until his vision cleared. He was alive. And so, apparently, was the dog. "Morning, Officer Hale," came a voice, soft, steady, tinged with a warmth that seemed almost out of place in this sterile place. The woman who entered the room was in her early 30s, Dr. Hannah Reyes. She was not tall, but carried herself with quiet authority. Her dark brown hair was pulled into a messy bun, loose strands brushing against her neck. She had olive skin and deep-set hazel eyes that seemed to see too much, both the wound and what caused it. She wore a light blue scrub top under a white coat stained faintly with iodine. A stethoscope hung around her neck like an old habit. Ryan studied her as she checked his chart. Her hands were small but precise, her voice calm and deliberate. "You're lucky," she said, without looking up. "Broken leg, mild hypothermia, concussion, but alive. That's something." He tried to speak. "The dog." She smiled faintly. "Still here, in the next room. Stubborn like his rescuer." Ranger lay sedated in a nearby veterinary unit, visible through a glass partition. His fur had been washed, revealing a faint patch of gray around the muzzle. His flank bore a healed surgical scar, the same kind found in service dogs that had undergone field operations. The tag around his neck had been cleaned. The letters were clearer now. K9 217, Unit 9, Wildfire Division. Hannah explained softly, "He wasn't just any dog. He's from a disbanded K9 rescue unit that worked the wildfire line 3 years ago, the one that ended in an explosion near Pine Valley." Her tone faltered for a fraction of a second before she composed herself again. "He must have gone missing after that." Ryan watched her closely. "You know that unit?" Her gaze drifted toward the window. "My brother, Miguel. He was a firefighter in that same division. He died that night." The words hung heavy between them. Ryan nodded slowly, understanding that kind of silence. Loss. Recognized loss. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. Hannah shook her head. "I'm not the one who needs sorry. That dog probably lost everyone too. Maybe that's why he came for you." Later, as nurses adjusted his IV and technicians wheeled in equipment, Ryan stared at the ceiling. The faint hum of machines filled the room, but his mind drifted elsewhere, to Sarah, to the snow, to Ranger dragging him out of the wreck. He remembered the moment he saw the letters on the collar. K9 217. It wasn't random. Someone had trained that animal for duty, loyalty, sacrifice, the kind of values he thought the world had forgotten. A week passed. Ryan's recovery was slow but steady. The townspeople who heard about the rescue called it a miracle, though he didn't feel like a miracle survivor. He felt unmoored. Between therapy sessions, he hobbled on crutches to the glass partition where Ranger rested. The dog's eyes followed him, alert, golden, and calm. "You saved me," Ryan murmured one morning. "Now what the hell am I supposed to do with you?" Behind him, Hannah's voice replied gently, "Maybe let him do what he's meant to. Heal someone again." She was standing at the door, holding a file in one hand and a coffee cup in the other. For a moment, they both watched Ranger breathing evenly, chest rising and falling. Ryan asked, "You really think dogs can heal people?" Hannah's eyes softened. "I think sometimes they remember how to love before we do." They began to talk more after that. Between checkups, Hannah would linger a bit longer, sometimes sharing stories of her brother, how he'd once rescued a cat from a burning truck, or how he always said, "Courage isn't loud, it's steady." Ryan shared pieces of Sarah, the way she used to write small notes on his coffee lid, her stubborn optimism. In those quiet conversations, the sterile room began to feel less like a recovery ward and more like a small bridge between two wounded worlds. When Ryan was finally cleared for discharge, Hannah met him at the reception. He wore a heavy winter coat, a brace on his leg, and that familiar guarded look soldiers wear when leaving safe ground. "You're going back up to the ridge?" she asked. He nodded. "There's a cabin near the tree line. Belonged to my uncle. Quiet place. Good for the dog." She hesitated, then handed him a folder. Inside was Ranger's medical record. "He's healthy. A little scar tissue, some frostbite on the paws, but strong. You should keep an eye on that limp. It might be old nerve damage." Ryan smiled faintly. "Guess we both limp now." They shared a silence that felt heavier than words. Before he turned to leave, Hannah added, "Ryan, I think it's no coincidence you found each other. That dog survived a fire. You survived the snow. Maybe both of you were just looking for something worth saving again." He didn't answer, just met her gaze. A quiet acknowledgement that she was right. Then he left. Outside, the air was crisp and sharp, carrying the scent of pine. Ranger padded beside him, head held low but alert. When Ryan opened the truck door, the dog leaped in without hesitation, curling into the passenger seat like he'd been there forever. As the engine rumbled to life, Ryan glanced at the reflection in the rearview mirror. The hospital shrank behind him, a sterile beacon swallowed by snow and distance. Hours later, they reached the cabin. It was small, wooden, and half buried in drifts, but it stood. Inside, dust covered everything. Ryan set down his duffel, started a fire, and for the first time in years, the sound of crackling wood didn't make him flinch. Ranger lay near the hearth, eyes closed, chest rising with slow, even breaths. Ryan sat beside him, staring at the flames, his thoughts tangled between past and present. He looked down at the dog. "Ranger," he said softly, testing the name. The shepherd opened one eye, as if to say he approved. Ryan smiled faintly. "Guess that's settled." Outside, the wind picked up again, rattling the windows. The firelight flickered over Ryan's face, strong, weathered, but softer now. Somewhere deep in his chest, something long frozen began to thaw. But in the quiet between heartbeats, he couldn't shake the feeling that their meeting wasn't just fate. It was the beginning of something much larger, something waiting to surface beneath all that snow. The sky above Silver Ridge was a bruised shade of gray, heavy with new snow that promised to fall before dusk. Ryan Hale trudged through the forest trail behind his cabin, the crunch of his boots echoing softly beneath the canopy of firs. Beside him padded Ranger, now strong again, his fur gleaming like burnished bronze against the fading light. The dog's gait was steady, confident, though every so often his ears twitched, his nose lifting toward some distant scent. The two had settled into a rhythm, a wordless understanding between men who had seen too much and beasts who had lost too many. It had been a month since the hospital. Ryan's limp was better, but his mind wasn't. Nights came with whispers, Sarah's voice, the creak of the blizzard wind, the helicopter fading away. He'd wake drenched in sweat, only to find Ranger sitting at his bedside, watching, silent as a sentry. The dog never barked during those nights. He just stayed. That afternoon, Ryan had followed Ranger deeper into the forest than usual. The dog's behavior had changed, ears sharp, posture taut. Something had drawn him down a narrow ravine blanketed in snow. Ryan followed, gripping the handle of his old rifle more from habit than fear. "Ranger," he called quietly. "What is it, boy?" The shepherd paused near a fallen pine. Beneath its roots, the snow had melted unevenly, forming a depression. Ranger began to dig, fast and deliberate, spraying icy powder behind him. Ryan knelt beside him and brushed away a layer of packed frost. His gloved fingers struck something hard. A dull clang echoed. He frowned and cleared more snow until the edge of a metal hatch emerged, half buried in ice. The surface was cold to the touch, painted in military gray and stamped faintly with a serial code, S97, property of Wexler Industries. Ryan's breath misted in the air. What the hell? With effort, he pried the hatch open. Rust screamed as the hinges gave way. Inside lay a short ladder descending into darkness. The air that rose out was stale, metallic, faintly chemical. He switched on his flashlight and climbed down. Ranger hesitated only for a second before following, landing softly behind him. The bunker was small, carved into stone, its walls lined with metal crates. Dust hung thick in the air. Ryan brushed off one of the lids, ammunition boxes, stenciled with government markings. Another crate was packed with sealed plastic bags of white powder, stacked neatly beside assault rifles, thermal optics, and tactical vests bearing the same logo, Wexler Industries, Tactical Division. Ryan's pulse quickened. Wexler Industries wasn't just a name. Thomas Wexler, the town's mayor, had been a decorated businessman, mid-50s, tall, silver hair always combed back, expensive suits even at charity events. His sharp blue eyes and rehearsed smile had convinced everyone he was a savior when he'd funded the town's police reform after the wildfire crisis. Ryan had met him twice, once at a ceremony for fallen officers, where Wexler had spoken about rebuilding trust. The man had charisma, but there was something hollow behind his grin, something that reminded Ryan of polished steel, cold, gleaming, and dangerous. Now, staring at the crates, Ryan understood. "Jesus Christ," he muttered. "He's stockpiling weapons." Ranger growled low, ears pinned back. The flashlight caught something on the far wall, a security camera, small and still blinking red. Ryan's stomach dropped. Someone was watching. He killed the light instantly, heart pounding. "Come on, boy, we're leaving." They climbed back up, sealing the hatch beneath the snow. By the time Ryan reached his cabin, snow had begun to fall again. He sat at his desk, breathing hard, and reached for the radio. Static answered him. He switched frequencies, trying to contact the precinct, but halfway through his call, the signal died. The line went silent. Then every light in the cabin flickered once and went out. "Ranger!" The dog was already standing, teeth bared, eyes fixed on the window. Ryan grabbed his sidearm from the drawer, motioned the dog toward the corner, and crouched by the door. The snow outside muffled sound, but then footsteps, faint and deliberate. Two figures moved through the trees, their shapes visible only when lightning flashed. The first shot shattered the window. Ryan ducked, firing back once, aiming low. Ranger lunged toward the door, barking, his growl echoing like thunder in the small cabin. The intruders burst through the back, one tall, wearing black tactical gear and a mask, the other shorter, carrying a shotgun. Muzzle flashes lit the room. Ryan dropped behind the table, fired twice. One shot found its mark. The shorter man collapsed with a cry, blood blooming across the snow near the threshold. The other fled into the storm. Ryan limped toward the fallen intruder, gun raised. The man's mask had slipped, revealing a scarred face. Early 40s, rough beard, eyes wild. He wore no police insignia, but his gloves bore an emblem, Silver Ridge Tactical Response Unit. Ryan's gaze fell to the handgun lying beside him, engraved on the barrel, Wex Pol 17. A chill crawled through him deeper than any blizzard. This wasn't some rogue act. This was internal. Before Ryan could question him, the dying man whispered something barely audible. "You shouldn't have opened it." Then his eyes went blank. Outside, sirens wailed faintly in the distance, too faint to be coincidence. Ryan knelt, staring at the weapon in his hand. He'd seen that model before, issued only to special municipal units authorized by the mayor's office. When the headlights finally appeared through the storm, they weren't police cruisers, they were black SUVs, unmarked. Ryan didn't wait to see who stepped out. He grabbed Ranger's leash, the gun, and his emergency bag. They slipped out the back door and into the woods, moving fast, snow swallowing their footprints. Half an hour later, they reached the frozen creek below the ridge. Ryan stopped only long enough to catch his breath. Ranger pressed close to his leg, eyes alert. The sound of engines echoed faintly behind them, then faded. For now, they were safe. Ryan leaned against a tree, sweat freezing against his neck. "We just kicked the wrong hornet's nest, didn't we, boy?" Ranger tilted his head slightly, tongue flicking against the snow. Despite everything, Ryan managed a bitter grin. "All right then, let's find out how deep this goes." Back at the cabin, the body of the attacker lay still, half buried by snow blown through the broken door. The radio light flickered once more before dying completely, and in the dark, the red camera light on the far wall blinked twice, then went out. Night settled over Silver Ridge with the silence of a loaded gun. The snow had stopped, but the air was sharp, each breath cutting like glass. Ryan Hale's cabin was gone, burned to its foundations after the attack. Now he stayed on the edge of town in an abandoned ranger outpost, the walls scarred with age and the smell of pine smoke thick in the air. Ranger slept near the stove, his breathing steady, though the faint scar along his flank glowed silver in the firelight. Ryan sat by the table, gun disassembled before him, cleaning it by habit, the rhythm of a man who knew that stillness could be fatal. It had been 3 days since he'd discovered the weapon with the Wex Pol 17 code. 3 days of silence from the precinct, no calls, no official reports, no acknowledgement. Every message he tried to send was intercepted or cut off. Silver Ridge had gone quiet, not the kind of quiet that meant peace, but the kind that meant something was coming. The knock at the door was soft, almost polite. Ryan rose, gun in hand. "Who is it?" "It's me," came a low voice. He relaxed slightly and opened the door to reveal Lieutenant Mason Briggs, his former commanding officer back in his Marine days, and now a senior detective with the county. Mason was 48, built like a tank, but with the tired eyes of a man who'd seen too much of the world's lies. His dark beard was streaked with gray, and his coat was dusted with snow. He had the posture of a soldier who never stopped expecting another war. "Jesus, Hale," Mason muttered as he stepped inside. "You've stirred a hornet's nest this time." Ryan poured him coffee. "You knew?" "I suspected." Mason took the mug but didn't drink. Wexler's been funneling federal relief funds into something off the books for years. I started digging last year, but the trail went cold. You finding that bunker?" He shook his head. "That just painted a target on you." Ryan leaned back. "So who's protecting him?" Mason's eyes flicked toward the window. "Half the precinct. The rest too scared to talk." He hesitated, lowering his voice. "Listen, there's a woman asking about you. Hannah Reyes. She's been going around town trying to reach you. I told her to keep her head down." Ryan's heart tightened. "Where is she now?" "She said she had to check on one of the town's rescue dogs, her clinic." Ryan's gut went cold. He stood abruptly, grabbing his coat. "She's alone." They drove fast, headlights slicing through the fog as they descended into town. The veterinary clinic stood at the far end of Willow Creek Road, a small white building surrounded by frost-bitten oaks. The front door was ajar, its lock shattered. Ryan drew his pistol and entered first. The lights flickered weakly, casting long shadows across the reception desk. Broken glass littered the floor. "Hannah," he called. No answer. Then he saw it on the ground. A trail of blood, small drops leading to the back door. Beside it lay a silver necklace, the one he'd given her a week ago, engraved with R and H. His throat clenched. Ranger growled low, nose pressed to the bloodstain. The dog's entire body stiffened, nostrils flaring. "She's alive," Ryan said, more to himself than to Mason. "He's picking up her scent." Mason nodded. "Then we follow it." The scent led them north, through the forest roads and into the desolate outskirts of town. Ranger guided them, his pace urgent but sure. After nearly an hour, the trail ended near a desolate quarry, Black Hollow, a labyrinth of abandoned mine shafts and collapsed tunnels once used for stone extraction decades ago. The place had a reputation, even among locals, haunted by accidents and whispers of disappearances. They parked a quarter-mile away and proceeded on foot. The moon hung low, pale and watchful. Snow crunched beneath their boots. Mason carried a suppressed rifle, Ryan his sidearm, Ranger padding silently ahead. At the entrance to the main shaft, faint light flickered, a lantern's glow, moving. They ducked behind a stack of crates. Voices echoed inside. "Get her ready," a man ordered. The tone was clipped, confident. Ryan recognized it instantly from an old press briefing. The same cadence, the same command. Martin Hale, chief advisor and enforcer to Mayor Wexler. Martin was in his mid-40s, lean but muscular, his hair slicked back, his suit too fine for the dirt around him. His eyes were cold, gray-blue, the kind of eyes that never looked away from violence. Rumor said he'd been military intelligence before disappearing into Wexler's payroll. Inside the mine, Hannah sat tied to a chair, face pale but defiant. A bruise darkened her cheek. Despite it, her gaze burned with fury. "You think hurting me will change what's coming?" she spat. Martin chuckled softly. "You and your friend Hale should have stayed quiet. But no, heroes always have to play savior." He raised his gun, aiming lazily at her head. "Let's finish this." Ranger's snarl broke the silence like thunder. The dog shot out from the shadows, teeth bared, slamming into Martin's arm just as the gun fired. The bullet tore through the air, striking stone. Martin shouted, swinging wildly. Ryan and Mason rushed in from opposite sides. Shots exploded in the confined space, echoes bouncing like lightning in the dark. Ryan fired twice, one round grazing Martin's shoulder, another hitting his leg. The man fell backward, clutching his wound. Ranger limped but didn't stop, tackling the second guard trying to reach Hannah. Mason covered the entrance, laying suppressive fire as Ryan reached Hannah, cutting her free. She gasped, grabbing his coat. "Ryan, you came." "Always," he said, pulling her behind him. Then a single gunshot rang out. Ranger yelped, stumbling, blood blooming along his shoulder. Ryan froze. Martin was still, alive, crawling toward his fallen weapon. Their eyes met, hate, fury, defiance. Ryan's hand steadied. One final shot ended it. The cave fell silent except for Hannah's sobs and the echo of Ranger's ragged breathing. Ryan dropped to his knees beside the dog, pressing his jacket to the wound. "Stay with me, boy. You did good." Outside, faint rotor blades grew louder. The FBI rescue chopper Mason had secretly called before the assault. Searchlights swept the quarry, painting the snow in trembling white beams. When they emerged from the mine, Hannah was clinging to Ryan's arm, her tears freezing on her cheeks. She looked at him and whispered, "You promised you wouldn't leave me." Ryan met her gaze, voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside. "I don't leave anyone." As medics rushed forward, Ryan lifted Ranger into his arms, blood staining his coat. Snow swirled around them like ash, and for a fleeting moment, Ryan thought of Sarah, of loss, of love reborn in another form. Above them, under the wash of helicopter light, the insignia on Martin Hale's ID card caught Ryan's eye. Wexler Industries, Defense Operations. The revelation hit like a blow. This wasn't just local corruption, this was a network, and the man behind it all still sat in his office, untouchable for now. Spring arrived softly in Silver Ridge, like an apology whispered after a long silence. The snow that had buried the mountains for months melted into glittering streams, running down the slopes like veins of light. The pines, once burdened with frost, now shimmered with dew. For the first time in years, the town breathed freely. Windows open, laughter spilling from porches, and the church bell ringing across the valley each Sunday morning. The storm that had almost destroyed them had, in its strange way, given them back their lives. Ryan Hale stood on the porch of his rebuilt cabin, the wood fresh and golden in the sunlight. He was dressed simply, denim shirt, rolled sleeves, and dark trousers tucked into worn boots. The winter had left its mark on him. A faint scar above his brow, a stiffness in his leg when he walked too long, but also a quiet peace in his eyes. He was a man who had known chaos and had chosen finally to make peace with it. Ranger lay stretched out in the grass nearby, his fur sleek again, golden brown under the sun. The old scar along his shoulder gleamed faintly like a badge. His eyes, amber and intelligent, followed every movement around him, though his expression was content. Occasionally he'd lift his head just to ensure everything was as it should be, then let it rest again with a satisfied sigh. Down by the slope, laughter rang out. Dr. Hannah Reyes knelt among a litter of rescued puppies, her auburn hair catching the sunlight like copper. She was dressed casually, an old plaid shirt tied at the waist, jeans dusted with soil, and boots scuffed from work. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes bright. The month since the abduction had changed her too. The faint line of a scar still traced her wrist, but her smile was warmer now, deeper, like someone who had faced fear and chosen hope anyway. Hannah had founded Ranger's Haven, the new animal rescue center she'd dreamed about since that night in the snow. The facility sat just beyond the edge of town, a modest complex with fenced fields, wooden kennels, and a sign carved by hand that read, "Ranger's Haven, where the lost find home." It had started small, with just 4 dogs. Now, less than a season later, there were 22. Abandoned shepherds, injured huskies, even a retired bomb-sniffing Labrador named Charlie, whose missing ear didn't stop him from acting like the leader of the pack. Ryan visited almost every day. He'd bring supplies, help with repairs, and sometimes just stand in silence, watching Hannah work. She moved among the dogs with ease, her voice low, her touch steady. She never hurried them, never demanded their trust. It simply came to her, like sunlight breaking through clouds. One afternoon, a convoy of county vehicles rolled into the gravel lot. Out stepped Sheriff Cole Maddox, a tall man in his early 50s, his silver badge gleaming against his navy coat. He was broad-shouldered, with short-cropped dark hair streaked by age and a mustache that framed a wry, knowing smile. Maddox had the kind of presence that made people straighten when he entered the room, calm authority built over decades in uniform. He approached Ryan with an outstretched hand. "Officer Hale, glad to see you're still walking the earth." "Still breathing, Sheriff," Ryan replied with a faint grin. Maddox handed him an envelope embossed with the county seal. "Official notice. The Commissioner's office wants you to head the new K-9 division. You'll oversee all tactical and rescue training for the district." Ryan blinked, surprised. "You're serious?" Maddox chuckled. "After what you and that dog pulled off last winter, half the state's been talking about you. You're a natural fit." He paused, lowering his voice. "And between us, this town needs someone who hasn't forgotten what honor looks like." Ryan accepted the envelope but didn't open it right away. His eyes drifted toward Ranger, who was now standing, tail wagging, watching the exchange. "Guess I'll need a partner," he said quietly. Maddox grinned. "Looks like you already have one." That evening, as the sun dipped behind the ridge, Ryan stood beside Hannah on the porch of Ranger's Haven. Below them, the field glowed in amber light. A few dogs chased each other through the grass, while Ranger, ever the watchful guardian, rested near the fence, ears twitching at every bark. "You know," Hannah said softly, "I never thought I'd see this place filled with life. After everything, it feels almost unreal." Ryan glanced at her. "You made it real. You turned pain into something that heals others. That's more than most people ever do." She smiled, brushing a stray strand of hair behind her ear. "You helped. You gave me hope when I didn't think I deserved any." He hesitated, then reached into his pocket, pulling out the repaired silver necklace he'd found months ago, the one engraved with R and H. "You left this behind," he said. "I figured it should come home too." Hannah's eyes softened as she took it. "Home," she repeated quietly, fastening it around her neck. Then, looking at him, she added, "You know, I think God sent Ranger for both of us, not just to save your life, but to teach us how to love again." Ryan's smile was slow, genuine, the kind that came from deep within. "Maybe you're right. Maybe miracles don't always come with wings." He looked toward Ranger, whose eyes met his as if understanding every word. "Sometimes they come on 4 paws. The wind carried the faint scent of pine and damp earth. The church bell rang once in the distance, echoing across the valley. Hannah leaned her head lightly against Ryan's shoulder, and for a long moment neither spoke. Ranger shifted, then stretched, rolling onto his side as the last rays of sunlight turned his fur into molten gold. The puppies tumbled around him, one climbing over his paw, while another tugged at his tail. He didn't move, only sighed, the picture of contentment. Ryan glanced at the horizon, where the snow line had retreated to the highest peaks. "You ever think about how close we came to not being here?" Hannah nodded. "Every day. But that's what makes this worth it, isn't it?" He turned toward her, eyes steady. "Yeah, I guess it is." They stood there until dusk swallowed the valley, the world painted in shades of rose and gray. For once, there were no sirens, no storms, no ghosts in the wind, only the gentle rhythm of peace settling where chaos had once lived. And as the first stars blinked alive above Silver Ridge, Ryan reached down to scratch Ranger's head. "You did good, buddy," he murmured. "You brought us home." The German shepherd thumped his tail once in reply, eyes half closed, utterly at peace. For the first time in a long while, everything was exactly as it should be. In life, miracles don't always arrive with thunder or shining light. Sometimes they come quietly in the shape of a person, a loyal dog, or a single moment that reminds us goodness still exists. God doesn't always send angels with wings. Sometimes he sends someone, or something, to walk beside us through the storm, to remind us that love and compassion are still the greatest forces in this world. In the noise and chaos of everyday life, hold on to the belief that miracles are still all around you, in the grateful eyes of someone you help, in the wag of a faithful tail, or in the moment you choose forgiveness over anger. Because sometimes the greatest miracle isn't being saved, but learning to love again. If this story touched your heart, share it with others so that faith, kindness, and hope can continue to spread. Leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, and join us as we tell more stories of faith, redemption, and loyalty. May God bless you. May he guide those who have lost their faith back to the light, warm every lonely heart, and remind us all that no matter how fierce the storm, his miracles are still among us, in every breath, in every act of love, and in every soul that dares to believe again.